We're going to talk a little bit here about intrastate and interstate radio networks. Okay. And what we're going to do here is talk a little bit about how an AEC communicator can develop and use these sorts of networks, identify some of the requirements for them, and then talk a little bit about interstate, interstate emergency communications, what the importance is. Okay. And very, very basic definition. Intrastate, within your state. Interstate is state to state. Do you all here in New Jersey have an intrastate network that you use on a regular basis? HF or VHF, UHF, whatever?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it meet regularly?
Well, normally it's monthly. Once a month.
Okay.
For the whole state.
Okay, good. HF?
HF, UHF, and VA. HF and 2 meter and 220.
220, okay.
And
And you can go statewide on 220?
We put a
We have
repeater up in the
repeater.
central part of the state at about almost 900 feet. And the outlying counties, we furnish them with beams some years back.
Okay.
So you can do it.
Good deal. That's interesting. All right, good. Interstate, do you have any interstate nets that you participate in? And I'm talking about emergency communication nets.
Different
With
counties
perhaps
do.
Pennsylvania or New York or?
Different counties do, because different counties check into like the hurricane net when they have the hurricane nets from the
Okay.
county EOCs and stuff. Each county's different.
What about some of your border counties that border New York or Pennsylvania?
yes,
Mostly a lot of traffic nets.
yeah, we down the 7 southern counties we have a networked D-Star repeater system, and because we're tied into a reflector, we get check-ins from Pennsylvania, Delaware, Ohio. We get check-ins from all over the U.S.
Okay, what reflector are you on?
20B.
20 Bravo?
currently.
Okay. So, talking about intrastate, and this really kind of applies to interstate also, we talk about auxiliary communicators being ready to provide that emergency backup communications. Okay. And, you know, we mentioned before that when all else fails, okay, again, that's not necessarily true. If you wait until all else fails, it's probably too late. We need to establish the relationships and the cooperation with the local emergency management directors, local public service personnel before all else fails, so that we can provide that auxiliary service. That's really where we fit in as volunteers. That's our bread and butter, is being those auxiliary communicators who can provide that statewide HF voice, statewide digital backup all across the state. One of the important things for an emergency manager is sometimes be able to get a picture of what's going on. If you have a big state, for instance Tennessee, you know, we run over 650 miles from one end of the state to the other. It's a pretty long state. If something is happening up in Johnson City, which is about 400 and some miles from Nashville, I may need to see a picture of it. Okay. A great way of getting pictures, especially if the auxiliary communicators are the folks that are there, is WinLink. Okay. It may be that we're on an HF net and they're describing something over a voice net and backing it up with pictures sent via WinLink. Okay. All those things are critical and important to provide that auxiliary support, that auxiliary communications. So setting up these nets and getting them ready to go is very important and very, very helpful. It'll help us sell ourselves to the emergency manager to the public service personnel. It's also a good idea to set up regional nets within your state, down even to the county or the city level, and having counties and cities communicating, again, with other counties and cities in the same region. I don't know how New Jersey is set up, if you have your counties grouped into different districts or regions or whatever. But if you do, it's a good idea to have them. Yeah.
New Jersey's a home rule state,
Okay.
so that creates certain complications. With basically everything that the state has is kind of duplicated down to the municipal level.
We have 565 municipalities,
Okay.
21 counties in one state, so there's a few players.
Yeah,
A
there's
lot
a
of-
few players.
A lot
Yeah.
of cat herding.
Yes.
Very true. Very true. Okay. Okay, that's good to know. But to the extent possible, again, if you can do it within your state, on a regional level or down there, it's a good idea if you can have a statewide AEC committee or a regional committee or a county committee or whatever jurisdiction works for you to start developing procedures for requesting the net, operating the net. Who calls this net? In an emergency, who's going to establish your statewide HF net? What's the procedures for it? What are the protocols? Okay. It's a good idea on a state level, if you have a state radio officer, it's a good idea to get the what does the arrow call them? The state net manager or something, I forget now. But, that person might be a good one to get involved with it. But again, get something going, get something working, think about it, and develop it. They come in very, very handy. And you'll be surprised how much during an emergency a statewide net will be used. This information on the net and when it meets and what it does and the purpose and so on and so forth needs to be put out. You want to get people involved. You want to get them checking in. You want to get their participation. You also want to get them ready for 24/7 operations. It's very easy to do a Monday night HF net at 6:30 every Monday night, and everybody checks in, and you have each county check in, and you maybe have a liaison from Civil Air Patrol and from Mars and Saturn and Red Cross check in and local EMAs or whatever. And you have your nice little net, and it's over with. Can you sustain it for 24/7 operations? How many trained net controls do you have? How many loggers? If you're going to go 24/7, okay, one or two net controls is not going to cut it. You can't do it that long. You physically can't do it that long. So you need to have 3, even 4 per shift so you can switch off, so you can have loggers. Okay. Train the net controls, maintain the roster, make sure that they're willing to dedicate themselves to this operation. It's nice to have a list, but can they do it? Will they do it? Will they be there? And again, if they can't, is there a backup? And is there a backup to the backup? Going back to what we said earlier, making sure folks have taken care of families. If you have to deploy somebody, for instance, to the state EOC to run a statewide net, and they're going to be there for a 12-hour shift, you need to know they're going to be there and be available. It goes back to what we said, be 3 deep, have them trained, have them dedicated to the function. Don't activate without authorization. Don't just start passing traffic back and forth without authorization, without a purpose, without a reason, without somebody telling you to do it. Again, it's nice to have the net, and sometimes everybody says, well, in an emergency, we're just going to get on the air and start. Well, somebody's got to be in charge. And this is some of the things that AEC committee can establish. Who authorizes us, under what circumstances, what are we going to do, how are we going to do it, when are we going to do it, how are we going to notify people to get on the air and participate in this net. And again, that comes down to developing the SOPs. And we've talked a little bit about SOPs. We're going to get into that a little bit more. But written SOPs that everybody's familiar with that set out these different things. How are you going to contact people? You might say, okay, well, we're going to call everybody. Well, if your cell phones are out and landlines are out, how are they going to know you're activating the net? Think about these things. Get them written out. Get them developed. Again, MOUs, if you're going to use repeaters, that's critical. If you're a repeater owner and you don't have an MOU with the different groups that are going to use that repeater, you're setting yourself up for a problem. It may just be a conflict. Well, the CERT group wants to use the repeater and the Skywarn group wants to use it at the same time. And they end up fighting each other for it. And you as the repeater owner then have to make an on-the-fly decision who's going to get priority. Well, if you've got MOUs saying that, you know, Skywarn has a priority on it, followed by CERT, followed by Red Cross, or whatever it happens to be. It may be that a particular club uses that repeater. Okay, you have an MOU with them. For my repeaters, I have right now 6 different MOUs. Okay, with different groups, setting up priorities and who can use it. And one of the things that does in those MOUs, I also say that whoever's in net control, for the time they're in net control, is also the control operator. So that kind of puts some of the onus on them if something goes wrong. It takes a little bit off me. Okay, make sure the AUXCOM community knows all the dates, times, and frequencies of your weekly nets. Okay, get the information out there. Push the information out. People can't participate if they don't know what's going on. Okay, common sense. If you have a chance, any pre-planned events, festivals, sporting events, parades, bicycle races, things like that, volunteer. Use your intrastate net for these things whenever possible. You may have, and I don't know if you do, but you may have a bicycle race that goes across the state. Okay, that's a perfect opportunity to practice and use intrastate communications. Okay, think about those things. Statewide weather spotting, you know, tracking storms as they come across and following them. That's another thing that a statewide intrastate net is really good for. And again, this earns us a lot of respect, if you will, a lot of appreciation from the public service folks, and we get asked back. And that's what we want to do. We want to get asked back. We want to make this a continuing thing that we do in terms of providing the auxiliary communications. So again, taking input from folks, how to do things better, common sense, but sometimes we forget. Sometimes we think, hey, we know what we're doing. We got this figured out. We've been doing it so long. Well, folks coming along have some good ideas. You know, D-Star, something that's up and coming. That's something to really look at and start exploring. You know, statewide. That's a great, great asset. And I don't own any stock in ICOM. So, there you go. First sentence, I like that one. The only thing voluntary when you join and when you quit. In between, you're dedicated. You've got to be there. You've got to make a commitment. You've got to make it work. Okay? And we're there to serve. Be part of the planning process. okay? And we're there to serve the EOC. We're there to help resolve the incident, help respond. You know, bottom line, what it really comes down to, and it may not seem it all the time, there's that incident that's going to happen where your communications are going to be the difference between saving the lives of somebody, some fellow citizen in your state. And you got to be dedicated to doing that. Interstate, the big problem there is coordinating it with the other state. That's where you have to go out, make the contacts, learn the people in the other states, develop the relationships, okay? Train, practice. You can do these interstate nets on a regional basis. You can do it on a national basis. Most of the time it's going to be with border states, okay? You're going to be looking at sharing information, sharing resources, sharing situation reports. Again, common frequencies, pushing the information out, having net controls X number deep, whatever you need. It's all important. One thing, whenever you write up an MOU between the states for an interstate net, is make sure that it's fairly clearly stated, or very clearly stated, that the home state has first priority on its people. You know, I mean, it may be nice to have that regional net going with some counties in Pennsylvania, but if you've got that hurricane coming ashore and you're needed to go to the shore and help out, that's where the first priority is. Take care of yourself and in your own state first. Training. Can't emphasize that enough. If any of these nets are going to be successful, intrastate, interstate, local, regional, whatever, training, frequency of operation. A net that meets once a quarter isn't really doing anybody a whole bunch of good. Monthly is good. Weekly is better on a regular basis. And make the nets worthwhile, make them interesting, do some training, have a training topic. Don't just make it check in, say hello, and goodbye. People get bored with that. Give them an opportunity to participate. Okay. All the requirements we talked about for intrastate networks are the same for interstate networks. Okay. And the big thing, of course, is meetings. Every once in a while, you're going to have to get together face-to-face, talk things over, maybe modify whatever your SOPs say, look at your protocols, work it out between yourselves. Okay. But it's really up to y'all to just, you know, work it out and make it work. And you have to decide that you want to make it work, decide that it's worthwhile to you. For those places that have been doing this, it's proven to be very, very worthwhile. So what we've done in this unit, we've talked a little bit about some of the requirements for the interstate and intrastate networks. We've talked a little bit about the communications. We've got some ideas on how to set them up. We emphasize that MOUs, SOPs are critical. Relationships are the most critical. If there's nothing else that comes out of this course, probably the relationships that you build in this course within this classroom and the relationships you go and build as you talk to your emergency management directors, your public service personnel, that's critical. And that's really what we can bring to the table, is that relationships and the built relationships and using them to provide that auxiliary support to help the citizens of our states.